So we are live. Okay. Hello everyone. We are here again for our second lecture of the day. Um, Once again, I said this is a special series of semis along for the International Semiotics Institute here in Palosk University in Czech Republic. About Afro-Brazilian semiotics, and we want to bring together research from Brazil here into Czech Republic to explore the richness and the complexity of Afro-Brazilian semiotics. And this series is grounded in the contributions of Black Brazilians to the cultural formation of Brazil. And this series aims to discuss systems of meaning, signs, code, and forms of communication that originate from Afro-Brazilian traditions, especially in context of resistance. And today, we are here to hear Eduardo Prachedes Queiroz. He's a PhD candidate in semiotics at the University of São Paulo, with a research period of the Université Paris Cité. He holds a master's degree in semiotics also at University of São Paulo, a specialization in Portuguese language and literature from Mackenzie University, and a bachelor's in translation and interpretation from 9 de Julho University. Since 2019, he has served on the executive committee of the Introduced Study Group on Discutive Semiotics, Labio Nihino. His research interests include discursive semiotics, literature, and racial issues. And he has published papers in these areas too. And he's currently a visiting professor at FATEC and FIO. And today, Eduardo gonna present his research about Black bodies in racist society, definition of interpreted paths. This is a semiotic reflection that examines how Black bodies and the Black subject function as signs with racist social structure. So, welcome, Eduardo. Thank you to be here with us to talk about your research. We're so glad to be here with you. And now we're gonna pass to you.
Thanks, Beatriz. Actually, I would like to start
Oh,
thanking you and Ana Julia. Is it?
we are not hearing you in here in the room. Wait a second.
Yeah, sure.
Hello, are you?
Now, do you hear me?
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No. I was just thanking you and Ana Julia for the invitation. Of course, I'm really glad to be here. I think what I'm about to say converges with what Ana Julia has said before, especially when she was talking about how Black people in Brazil in lots of situations have to take care of how they dress or how they look because well we know what our bodies mean to the society. So yeah, maybe I think we have something in common here. Let me see if I can get to present the slides. You tell me if it's working, please.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
it's
can
on.
see it.
Perfect. So well, yeah, thank you again, Ana Júlia, Beatriz Alves. I'm really glad to be here at Semios Along. And I would also like to thank Letícia Moraes. She's a professor at the Federal University of Paraíba here in Brazil. Because if it weren't for her, I would not have received the invitation to participate in this event. And I'm really glad it's an honor to participate here. So yeah, thank you, Letícia, as well. Um, It's the first time I talk about semiotics in English, so this is actually kind of a challenge. Let's see how I can get to it. um, and some parts I'm going to read, so I think it's going to be more understandable if I read some parts. So yeah, let's see. And in my research, which is funded by CAPES, a Brazilian organ, I investigate racial relations with a semiotic approach. But um, I must say that the semiotics I research is the French semiotics. That is the one created by Greimas and his successors, of course. And that means the semiotics I deal with has its origins in linguistics. And well, it's important to stress that in order to establish the theoretical foundation of my research, of course, but also because I'll start today with a reflection based on Saussure's ideas. Saussure, as you all know, is considered to be the father of modern linguistics, and well, and what I'm about to say is probably in this following starting minutes are probably not new to all of you, but it's going to be important to the sequence of the presentation. So, yeah. Well, according to Ferdinand Saussure, this person who is considered to be the father of modern linguistics, signs are elements composed of two parts, a signifier and a signified. For example, when we think of the word dog, we have as the signifier this sequence of sounds, the oh, dog, which Saussure calls a sound image. And he calls it a sound image because the important thing here is the mental impression of the sound and not the physical sound itself. The important thing here is what the sound you remember, you have in your mind when I ask you to think of the sound, to think of the word dog. Well, and as the signified, we have the concept of dog, an animal with four legs and a tail, often kept as a pet or trained for work, for example, hunting or guarding buildings. I took a small definition of the word dog from the online Oxford Dictionary. Anyway, this part corresponds to the concept. And when Saussure thought of this, he had the natural languages in mind. So he was thinking about natural languages like Portuguese, English, French, Spanish, etc. But the semioticists have expanded this idea to all kinds of languages. So in semiotics, in French semiotics, we deal with any kind of texts, not only the verbal ones. That means a novel is considered to be a text, of course, but a painting is also considered a text to semiotics, as well as a photograph, a song, a movie, a play, and so on. And now that we're thinking of any and all semiotic systems, such as written verbal language, or the plastic language, which we see in paintings, for instance, or the sonorous language, etc., we are no longer dealing with the signifier and signified, but with plane of expression and plane of content. That's why we started in semiotics, we started using plane of expression and plane of content, because we are dealing with all semiotic systems. But the plane of expression would correspond to the signifier, while the plane of content would correspond to the signified. And since Saussure, the relation between signifier and signified, or plane of expression and plane of content, if we bring to semiotics ideas, but this relation is socially established, and that is important. That means that the only reason why a plane of expression and a plane of content are together to form the sign dog, for example, is a social agreement about that. That is, there's nothing in the plane of expression that motivates its meaning. That's why the same concept has different planes of expression. Like, I mean, the concept of an animal that barks, that has four legs and a tail, and is often kept as a pet, is called a dog in English, but it's called cachorro in Portuguese, chien in French, perro in Spanish, and so on. And well, with that in mind, we can now start thinking about the racialized bodies in Brazilian culture and in other cultures as well, but not all of them, of course. Um, but well, we can think of these bodies, thinking about them as if they were signs or figure signs. That is, with plane of expression and plane of content. And in this research, in this presentation, I'm mostly interested in talking about black bodies, not all racialized bodies, but black bodies more specifically. Um, and it's important to say that I'm not considering only the words black bodies, but also these bodies themselves with the phenotypic features such as color of skin, shape of nose, shape of lips, texture of hair, and etc. All signs, all traces that are connected to black. And maybe I should say that in Brazil, in Brazilian Portuguese, and in Brazil more specifically, we have a word that is negro that comprehends both pretos and pardos. These things are organized differently in each country, but in Brazil we have this word negro, which comprehends both pretos and pardos. And in a really poor translation, we could say that pretos are dark-skinned black people, and pardos are light-skinned black people. They are both within the spectrum of black people. So yeah. Um, well, and when we think of the black bodies as figure signs, I hope it's not difficult to deduce that there's nothing in the plane of expression that motivates the axiological meanings that are negatively associated with the signifier or with this plane of expression. What I mean is everything is strictly conventional in this relation between the plane of expression, black, and the negative meanings commonly associated, commonly assigned to this sign, to this plane of expression. So I insist, the only thing that holds together the plane of expression and the plane of content of this figure sign that is the black body is a social convention. And this converges with many other discourses, such as those that deny essentialisms based on racial issues. And because discourses is discourses that use it to to say that essentialism was a real thing were most of times racists. So yeah. And if we consider the period right before black slavery in the 15th century, we could agree with Franz Fanon, who says that white people, it was white people who have created black people, but it was black people who have created blackness. I put both the English translation and the original in French because I translated the word negritude as blackness, but I believe not all the meanings of negritude are present in blackness. Because these words, negritude, we have the same word, the exact same word in Portuguese as well. Negritude was born in the context of the French colonies, with literary, political, and cultural inside the political culture, the literary and cultural movements. And it was aimed at affirming black identity. And I don't think blackness has the same meaning. So yeah, it was important, I think, to bring both the original and the translation. But well, what Fanon states in this part, in this citation, is aligned with what I said about black bodies as signs, because with this statement, I think we could like translate into discursive semiotics, the French semiotics, and we would say that Fanon means precisely that at that point, some white people have worked to attach a plane of expression to a plane of content to form the black sign in linguistic terms. And since then, there have been several strategies to consolidate this link, this connection between the signifier and this concept. And all these strategies, they work and they have worked together in the sense that they have been repetitions of the same discourse of assignment of a negative meaning to black bodies. And it's with these productions, with these repetitions, that this social convention, this social agreement attaching plane of expression and plane of content uh, is uh, is strengthened for black bodies. So scientific discourses, literature, soap operas, advertisement, and many other cultural productions reinforce these bad meanings to black bodies. Um, and filled with these meanings, the black bodies in racist societies are often the element that decides which path will be followed in the interpretation of a text or a situation in which this black body takes part. I said interpretation of a text, but thinking of a text in the semiotic sense, which means everything is a text to semiotics, kind of. um, and that's something I want to talk about today when dealing with the definers of isotopy. But well, let me addressing the black sign is only the beginning, but it's necessary to think about the participation of this sign at other, if we use the words of Jacques Fontanille, at other niveau de pertinence, which I'm translating here as levels of pertinence, but I'm not really sure if this is the best translation. So we will think about the roles of these figure signs, the black bodies, in the texts enunciated, in practices, and in ways of life. We'll get to it. This figure sign, as we will see, is noticed by the subject of perception as an element that condenses certain practices and certain ways of life. No, it's okay. Well, and although they are widespread, discourses that follow a social convention, the social convention that fills the black sign with negative meanings, they are not the only ones that exist even in racist societies. There are also discourses that seek to subvert this and establish other meanings for the black signifier, meanings that can be either new or maybe retrieved. They can be taken from ancient discourses as well. So we have to think about the multiplicity of meanings conveyed by the black sign. So now I think we can move on to a discussion about the isotopies. Oops, I'm going backwards. Yeah, isotopies in semiotics. First, I want to recall the concept of isotopy in French semiotics. It's a term borrowed from physics and used for the first time by Greimas in a book called Structural Semantics, Semantiques Structurales. It was in French, and it was published in 1966. And to start characterizing what isotopies are for semiotics, we can check what Hastier says in the document, a publication of 1981. This document has lots of texts. I think I don't really remember how many, but there were some texts. And Hastier's text is called Le développement du concept d'isotopie, the development of the concept of isotopy. And he writes the following. We call isotopy an iteration of a linguistic unit, as you can see in the slide. And these iterations, when belonging to a plane of content, they grant a sort of interpretation possibility, interpretation path, so to speak. In other words, we are able to understand what a text is about because we recognize its semantic recurrences, its isotopy or isotopies, its the iterations So we can say a novel like Dom Casmurro, it's a Brazilian novel, a famous Brazilian novel. We can say this novel, Dom Casmurro, is about jealousy, for example, because we recognize the reiterations that allow us to follow that theme. If the novel only mentioned something about jealousy one time once, it would be impossible to say that this novel was about jealousy. So we have to have recurrences. And we should also remember that a text may have more than one isotopy at the same time. And in such cases, when there is more than one isotopy in the same text, it's possible that we have isotopy connectors, as Greimas himself noted back in structural semantics. And these are elements that belong to different isotopies within the same text and connect those isotopies. I don't want to talk too much about this because it's not that important for us today. It's just to follow a path of, just for us to understand everything. But I can give you an example of a joke. Jokes are often based on this. So we have a joke like this. It's not a funny joke, but yeah, kind of. So something like, why didn't the shark swallow the clownfish? And the answer is because it tasted funny. And funny in this case is the isotopy connector because it participates in both meanings, in both interpretations. Funny can be something that makes us laugh, but funny can be also something that is strange, odd. And this word funny connects both things in this small text, this joke. And well, in French semiotics, we can also see an element that is called isotopy trigger in a free translation. And to remember what characterizes this element, we can start from what Diana Luz Pessoa de Barros says. She's an important semioticist, Brazilian semioticist, and she wrote that in a book called Teoria do Discurso, Discourse Theory, in a free translation. And she said, an element is considered to trigger an isotopy when it cannot be integrated into an already recognized region. Isotopic residues thus force one to propose a new isotopic plane. In other words, an isotopy trigger is an element that inaugurates a new isotopy because it does not fit well within the isotopies that we already noted before. So a new element pops up, and we see ourselves obligated to rethink the text with this new meaning. I couldn't think of an example in English, but I can tell you about something in Portuguese, something really simple and maybe not that interesting, but just for us to keep track of everything. So there is a song by a Brazilian band called Dead Fish. The name of the group is in English, and the song is called Você, which is you in Portuguese. And when we start listening to the song, we might think that the singer is talking about love. But the last word he sings, the last word in the song is dinheiro. He yells dinheiro, which means money. And when we listen to it, when we listen to these words, we realize that the song was actually about money and not love. So that meaning was triggered by the element, these words, by these elements, money at the end of the song. So this is an example, maybe a bad example, but an example of an isotopy trigger. And now I want to say that there is yet another isotopic element, which we could call an isotopy definer. And to begin characterizing it, we may say that this element would have enough semantic force, semantic power to establish one isotopy, even if the texts have multiple interpretative possibilities. So it will activate in the thematic or figurative elements certain meanings and kind of erase others. And these other meanings, they will remain virtual, not realized. And in a society structured by racism, and more specifically anti-black racism, the black bodies will often work as an isotopy definer. In many situations, the black body will be the most important element for the adoption of an isotopy. And we should also note that in a racist society, white bodies may also serve as isotopy definers, but they are probably going to define isotopies of power, for instance. But we can explore that some other time. What interests me the most today is the black body working, functioning as an isotopy definer. Remember, the isotopy is this recurrence of elements that assure us one interpretation of something. Yeah. So the most the most important thing about this isotopy defining element is maybe the fact that it obliterates, it erases, it excludes other possible isotopies in order to establish one. And this would be probably the main difference between isotopy triggers and isotopy definers. Because isotopy triggers, they don't have, not necessarily, they don't have the ability, the capacity of defining one isotopy and obliterating the others. Um, and maybe the difficulty in recognizing an element as an isotopy definer is that this characterization uh, doesn't generally occur at the level of the enunciated text, as we call in French semiotics, but mostly at other levels, or another level of pertinence, the level of practices. Let's try to understand this briefly. Let's take a look, a peek at the levels of pertinence discussed by Fontanille, Jacques Fontanille, who presented this idea. I'm not going to talk a lot about these layers, about these levels, but I think something has to be said. So I brought here what I brought here is a really simplified table with these ideas regarding the levels of pertinence, and they are six. There are six levels of pertinence. The first one is the level of the figure signs. When we were talking about the black body, we were talking about signs or figure signs. So we are at this level. But the second level is the level of enunciated texts. The third is where we have the objects. The fourth, in the fourth, we have the predicative themes or the practices. Then in the fifth, we have the strategies. And the last one is where we have the forms of life. Okay, and then I was beginning to speak Portuguese. I don't know why, but and then I think a simple example will help us, although oversimplifying is always risky. So if we take a novel such as O Cortiço, it's a Brazilian novel, was translated into English with the title of The Slum. But if we analyze this novel, we can analyze, for example, its figure signs, and then we remain in the first level of pertinence. We can analyze the enunciated text as well by examining the themes, the narrativity, and so on, and maybe analyzing something from the plane of expression, and we would be at the level of the enunciated text. Then we can move up a level and go to the level of objects to see material differences, for example, between a printed paper edition of this book and an e-book. These are differences that we check in the level of the object. We can move up another level of pertinence to get to the predicative scenes. And then we can discuss, for example, editorial practices of certain period when the book was published, or we could discuss interpretation practices as well. And if we move another level, we reach the strategies, which are, it's the way that these practices are thought or managed. The way you manage the practices is what we call the strategies. And moving up yet another level, we reach the last one. It's the level of forms of life, where we can discuss, for example, the form of life of a novel, of novel readers, or even the form of life of a naturalist writer. It's the case of O Curtiço's writer, the slums writer. He was a naturalist writer. Oversimplifying, once again, we could say that discussing forms of life is like discussing the ethos behind the practices and the strategies. But well, all of this is just to cover things really quickly without using too much of my time, because now I want to return to what matters the most now. When we speak of isotopies, we are still dealing with the level of the enunciated text, because if we continue with the example of the slum, O Curtiço, the novel, it's possible to notice within the enunciated text, and more specifically within the plane of content, many elements that sustain isotopies, such as the sensuality isotopy. We can check that in the book, in the novel, but also the isotopy, the subservience isotopy, the violence isotopy, and so on. And we are at the level of the enunciated text, what we call enunciated text in semiotics. But when we start speaking of isotopy definers, we could be dealing with the enunciated text, but we could be dealing as well with different levels of pertinence and the level of practices, mainly the level of practices, often governed by forms of life. I hope this will be more understandable when I get to the examples. And while a text may present different interpretative possibilities, there are cases in which one certain element works as the definitional, the organizing element of meaning. And this occurs without a doubt through the mediation of the subject of perception. That is, the person interpreting a text or a situation, for example. When a certain element enters their field of presence, their field of presence, the field of presence of this subject of perception, their worldview regarding that element, that element that just entered the that just entered the field of presence, and which is often shaped by stereotypes, makes this subject of perception ignore any other interpretative possibilities, focusing on one single possibility, even if for other subjects that might not be the most plausible interpretation for that given text or situation. This is why I said that these interpretative practices are guided by a form of life, because a racist form of life, for example, will guide certain racist interpretative practices. And here I think it's worth recalling something that Fontanilli says in a text in Portuguese, that the title of this text is Práticas Semióticas, Imanência, Pertinência, Eficiência, Otimização. I brought a translation, free translation, and he said that practices, let's remember the levels of pertinence. Practices, on the one hand, integrate material elements from the lower levels, signs, texts, and objects, in order to make them distinctive and pertinent elements and give them meaning. And on the other hand, they receive a meaning from their participation in the higher levels, strategies, and forms of life. That means that on one side we perceive practices feeding the signs, the texts, and the objects, but on the other side we have these practices being fed by the strategies and the forms of life. So returning to what I said about black bodies in an anti-black racist society, we can say that the black body will work as an isotopy definer because the subject who perceives this black body adheres to a racist form of life that shapes their way of seeing the world. And so this form of life guides their interpretative practices. So a black man wearing a suit will be recognized by this subject who adheres to a racist form of life, of course. But this black body will be recognized as a security guard or a pastor or a chauffeur, a driver, and not as a business person or a lawyer, for instance. That's what we see at this news shared by a portal called Wall in March 2022. And the headline's translation is, as you see, black lawyer says he was mistaken for a driver by a security guard at the Federal Supreme Court of Brazil. And well, here's what's at stake what's at stake is the appearing and not the being, and the appearing for a certain subject of perception, of course. And in such cases, the being loses importance and the appearing aspect is taken as the truth, the absolute truth. And well, in discursive semiotics, we have a very interesting tool, which is the veridiction square. I'll go through it really fast. And I know it doesn't seem to be a square in here, but if we take into consideration only the black part, then we have the square. So we have four positions, the black, what's written in black, we have four positions, and then the relations among these positions allow us to deal with the illusions, if we see what is in the right part, which is the combination of something that appears to be, but it's not. Or we can deal with falsehood, something that does not seem to be, but it does not seem to be, and it's not. Something that is a secret, the falsehood is at the bottom. And then we have the secret on the left, something that doesn't seem to be, but is. This is called a secret in semiotic terms. And we can deal with the truth in semiotic terms as well. That is something that seems to be and is. But what really interests me now, today, in fact, is to follow the thoughts of two researchers who make attentive reading of the veredictory modalities. This what we are seeing in the slide. And they do this in a study called Uma Leitura Atensiva das Modalidades Veredictórias. It's also in Portuguese. It's attentive reading of veredictory modalities. And this is just to say very briefly and in passing that for a subject who adheres to a racist form of life, black bodies, they work as isotopy definers because they don't just appear to be something for this perceiving subject. It's not that the black body kind of appears to be something if we follow what's written in the image. The fact is that the black body strongly appears to be this thing. A chauffeur, a driver, for example, if we think of the news I just showed you. At the same time, it's not that this black body doesn't appear to be something, a lawyer, for example, which was the case in the news I showed. It doesn't seem, this body doesn't seem at all as a lawyer in this subject's point of view, of course. So there is a really appearing and a not appearing at all going on at the same time to form this element that is the isotopy definer. Now I think we can move on to some examples of what I'm saying so that it becomes more understandable. I hope, but you tell me. I'll try to work with literature, researches, and news taken from Brazilian online newspaper, as I did before. Um, First, we have the results of isotopic being activated by black bodies. The first kind of examples, the first kind of results is when we see black bodies activating the isotopy of violence or crime. First, we can start with a piece of literature, an example taken from a short story by W.E.B. Du Bois or Du Bois. He's more famous for having written, I don't know how the title is in English. It's As Almas do Povo Negro, The Souls of Black Folk, I think, something like that. But he wrote also literature, and The Comet is a short story written by this person. And in this story, a comet seems to wipe out all life in New York, except for Jim's life. Jim is a black man who happened to be in a bank basement searching for some things because his boss requested him to do this when the comet hit the Earth. And then that's why he was not affected by the comet's toxic gases, and he did not die. He didn't die. And when he comes out of the basement and he realizes that everyone in the bank is dead, he immediately thinks that that he might be taken as for a thief or for a murderer. And then we read the following: the messenger, the messenger, Jim, paused and glanced about. He was not a man easily moved, but the sight was appalling. Robbery and murder, he whispered slowly to himself as he saw the twisted, oozing mouth of the president where he lay half buried on his desk. Then a new thought seized him. Jim. If they found him here alone with all this money and all these dead men, what would his life be worth? So it's not surprising, at least not for a black person, that Jim fears being incriminated. He knows what his body represents in a racist society, and more specifically in the racist society he lives in. This was the United States in the 1920s. So he knows his body activates an isotopy of crime in a racist society. But we can talk about news as well. So real things that were showed in the news. On the left, we have an online news from G1, and the headline reads: residents say that a young man was killed by mistake by policemen in Rio de Janeiro, in Rio. In this situation, the residents they said that a black teenager, he was only 16 years old. So the residents say that this teenager was carrying a bag of popcorn, and then the policeman interpreted that he was holding a bag of drugs. So here we have the isotopy of drug dealing. And then they killed him. Of course, we have to discuss if this should be the result of someone who was dealing drugs. We have to question that. We cannot kill a person because this person is dealing drugs. But in this case, this teenager wasn't even doing this. But his body represents an element that is so strong to define an isotopy in a racist society such as Brazil, that that a figurative element turns into another. I mean, a bag of popcorn becomes a bag with drugs. On the right, we have something really similar. It's an online news from El País, and the headline reads in English: policemen mistake always commit mistakes. Huh? Policemen mistake umbrella for rifle and kill waiter in Rio. Once again, it's Rio de Janeiro. Witnesses say. So here, a black man who was a waiter, he was nearby. He was nearby. I don't really remember the name of this place, but well, it's not important. It was a day to day thing, um, and he was this waiter, this black man was a waiter. He was carrying an umbrella, and he was wearing a baby carrier. And the police have mistaken these objects with a rifle and a bulletproof vest. So here we see that the isotopy of drug dealing or violence is activated by this black body once again. So his body represents, such as the other one on the left, it represents an element strong, so strong to define an isotopy that figurative elements are turning into others. The umbrella becomes a rifle, the baby carrier becomes a bulletproof. They become this in the interpretation of the policemen who adhere to a racist form of life, of course. Then we can move on really quickly because my time is running out to discussing black bodies activating the isotopy of pain tolerance. I'll start with an excerpt from The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, in which we can see how the black body of a woman in labor activates the isotopy of pain tolerance. It's a little bit long, but it's worth reading. So we read the following. The black character is saying, "They put me in a big room with a whole mess of women. The pains was coming, but not too bad. A little old doctor come to examine me. He had all sorts of stuff. He gloved his hand and put some kind of jelly on it and rammed it up between my legs. When he left off, some more doctors come. One old one and some young ones. The old one was learning the young ones about babies, showing them how to do. When he got to me, he said, now these here women you don't have many trouble with. They deliver right away and with no pain, just like horses. The young ones smiled a little. They looked at my stomach and between my legs. They never said nothing to me. Only one looked at me, looked at my face, I mean. I looked right back at him. He dropped his eyes and turned red. He knows, I reckon, that maybe I weren't no horse foaling. But them others, they didn't know. They went on. I see them talking to them white women. How you feel? Gonna have twins? Just chucking them, of course, but nice talk, nice friendly talk. I got edgy, and when them pains got harder, I was glad to have something else to think about. I moaned something awful. The pains wasn't as bad as I let on, but I had to let them people know having a baby was more than a bowel movement. I hurt just like them white women. Just because I wasn't whooping and hollering before didn't mean I wasn't feeling pain. So this is a strong excerpt from Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. And to give examples in real life of black bodies as a definer of isotopy of tolerance to pain in Brazilian society, we can think of the case of black women suffering a kind of obstetric violence based on the belief that their bodies they are resistant to pain. This can be observed in cases such as the one we see reported in Carta Capital, a Brazilian magazine, concerning a black woman who, after 12 hours of labor and fasting in a municipal hospital in São Paulo, requested anesthesia from a female doctor, but she was also administered synthetic oxytocin. This is difficult for me to say. Synthetic oxytocin, which was applied with the intention of increasing her contractions. And this use of drugs to intensify contractions can cause greater pain. In this case, the woman said that after she took the shot, she felt terrible pain, as if she were being torn apart. And this use of the synthetic oxytocin is not recommended by the World Health Organization, just so you know. Well, I can skip some things to, let's see. Yeah, I'll just comment on this really quickly. Because other cases of bodies of Black women being considered resistant to pain can be seen in data presented in articles such as this one called A Dor da Cor, Iniquidades Raciais na Atenção Pré-Natal e ao Parto no Brasil, or in English, The Color of Pain, Racial Inequities in Prenatal and Childbirth Care in Brazil. This article examines the influence of race and color on pregnancy and childbirth experiences. And among the findings, the researchers pointed out as revealing of the impacts of racial or color inequality, the finding of lower use of analgesia among the a lower use of analgesia among Black women. I'm just seeing here that my internet is unstable, so maybe we had some trouble.
Yeah, but we're already back. You can continue.
Great. But well, I was just commenting on how the bodies of black women in real life, not only in literature, are considered to be resistant to pain. Well, I think we can move on to the end to sum it up, because I wanted to discuss, to finish what I wanted to discuss, I would like to remember that figure signs in general, although they are a social convention, a social agreement, they are not univocal. They don't have only one single meaning. They generally have multiple meanings, and these multiple meanings may be in dispute. And in this regard, it's also interesting to consider how these different meanings compete for a place of privilege in the system. Here we could maybe think of Lotman's semiosphere, but maybe some other day. And we could also consider that the modes of semiotic existence and think of the potentialization as the possibility of changing the future, a way out of the federalism that sometimes seems to be way too present in speeches in general. So what I mean is, maybe I'm in a hurry, but what I mean is investing this black plane of expression with positive meanings and reinforcing them might be a good way of feeding the system with new possibilities. That is, it's a potentialization of the system in semiotic terms. And maybe I think that's what Saidia Hartman does when she's talking about critical fabulation. And that's what Conceição Evaristo, a Brazilian writer, does with what we call in Brazil escrevivência. It's a neologism that means something like writing living. And in this regard, and to finish what I wanted to say, I repeat the words of Walida Imarisha, who once said in a text called Rewriting the Future, using science fiction to re-envision justice, she says that, oops, I went backwards again. Yeah, she says that, and I finish with that, we are living science fiction. We are the dreams of enslaved Black folks who were told it was unrealistic to imagine a day when they were not called property. Those Black people refused to confine their dreams to realism, and instead, they dreamed us up. Then they bent reality, reshaped the world to create us. That's it. I love these Imarisha's words, and I hope you do too. And that's it. Thank you for listening. Let me see if I stopped sharing. I think so.
Thank you so much for this. Very powerful for me, and I guess for everybody here in the room. And I don't know, anyone here want to comment anything or ask a question? Okay, so I will continue, and I took a lot of notes because here in Europe, I guess it's a little difficult to present to people outside of Brazil of our Russian culture how our racism works, because I think like isotopes is a very interesting way to perceive ourselves in this complexity of racism in Brazil. Because I get this feeling that people outside don't get why a happy and most black country has this systematically racism that came with us. And when we put the lens of semiotic on this and use these isotopies, I think it's more easy to understand how this is integrated to ourselves, to our bodies, how it's hard to depart of this perception. And I think your lecture connects very well with Anna, the Lex lecture, and the fashion subject, and explain even more how black borders are triggered as a sign of bad things in Brazilian society. Even with the right code and the right scenes, we are danger somehow and are less than we are pretend to be. And I think we can say, like, connecting the two lectures, that Mandrake as black bodies can activate the entropy of violence and crime. And otherwise, white bodies can present themselves as power and luxury using the same codes as Mandrakes. So I think it's very important to hack the system, as Lena said before. And as you said now in the finish of the lecture, I think we have to decolonize these isotopies. And as you said, I took this note, utilization of the system in semiotic terms, how we can hack the system and present our bodies as our blackness, like you said in the beginning, is us black people who create the blackness. And I think when you present this powerful lecture as yours, the both of you, we are make a statement, and I think everybody leave this room with a lot of knowledge and powerful too. Thank you so much. Oh, wow. Okay, you're
Yeah.
here. Here.
No, I would like to thank you for for what you said right now, because yeah, I think hacking the system is way better than potentializing the system, even if we're talking about semiotic terms. So, wow, this comment, it was worth like 6 months of research, I think. Incredible. And I loved what Anna said before as well, and her outfit as well, because that's the thing. It's what you said right now. Black bodies wearing kits, as we say in São Paulo, are different from white bodies wearing the same kits. So yeah, really important. Loved it.
For dress your kid today, Anna. Uh, So I think that's all. It was amazing. Thank you so much for this. Was very incredible, as I said before. And thank you so much for this. And for everybody that is still with us, please keep it coming to see the next lectures. We have a lot of Brazilian researchers with such amazing research as both Anna and Eduardo present today. And that's it. Keep and follow our social media. Please follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and here in YouTube too. And that's it. If you want to say one more last thing, Eduardo, thank you so much.
No, that's it. Thank you as well. And yeah, I'll just repeat what you said. Please, people, come to see the others as well. Bye. Thanks.
To the transmission. Okay.